This is your Chargers linebacker, Dan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, Monday Night Harbaugh is officially just over 24 hours away. And we may be a little bit late in getting to the preview on this, but it is the beauty of Monday Night Football is that it gives Dan and I a little bit more time as it relates to our schedule on top of what the Chargers are doing and getting the latest injury reports and biggest storylines to follow as it relates to this game. But big time matchup for the Chargers, who just came off of their big divisional win against the Denver Broncos, looking to keep their winning ways alive as they currently sit at 3-2, trying to get to 4-2 after Monday night. But before we get into everything as it relates to this game, Dan Wolkenstein, how are you, sir?
I am good. I'm very good. Everything is awesome. I took my daughter to see that new Piece by Piece movie this last week, Friday, and had no idea what the plot was. Turns out, learned a lot about Pharrell, and my daughter loved the movie. So we were vibing the whole time. Weird having football on a Monday where we get to do a preview on a Sunday and we still got time. But we've all kind of talked about this is kind of a juicy matchup, in my opinion. And a lot of people are talking about how bad this Arizona Cardinals defense is, which it is. But their offense is, for the most part, better than the Chargers so far. A lot of asterisks in there. But a fun matchup, an important one, as this is a huge pivotal Monday Night Football game. Chargers have a chance to go to 4-2, which would be huge. So I'm good. Jake, how are you? And then let's tell the friends about our friends. Let's pay the bills.
Yeah, you know, Mike Greenberger always talks about how great October is as it relates to the month in sports. You have playoff baseball. You're right in the thick of the NFL games on top of college football that we all witnessed yesterday. But on top of that, you know, October is just great as it relates to Halloween and horror, which my wife and I are thick in our horror movie calendar marathon that we are going into. Tonight is actually Don't Breathe is actually what we are going to be watching. So it's one of our personal favorites that we enjoy watching, but another one of your personal favorites should be BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. You think you know your stuff? Get in on our 200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every single week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of up to $200K. When the game is over, head on over to our online betting casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today. That's betonline.ag to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here.
So, Kyler Murray, James Conner, possibly Marvin Harrison.
Likely Marvin Harrison. I don't think that there's any issues.
Chargers, Cardinals. Jake, what's the 5,000 foot view for you before we get to all the offense versus defense on both sides, the key matchups, the predictions, all of that? What is the big picture of this game as you kind of start peeling the onion?
You might find an Arizona Cardinals team that may be in desperation for a win, Dan, in terms of their inconsistencies that they've had at offense with their offense throughout games. They tend to actually start pretty well in general, but then as the game has gone on over the past few weeks, it's been a little bit inconsistent. So in that division, you're looking for any type of a spark to get yourself back on track and be able to move up in those ranks. So for the Chargers team, it's very different. Once again, this is your second game straight that you're playing on the road against a very talented team. We talked about as much as everybody did when it related to the athleticism of Bo Nix and what the Chargers were not able to do in terms of containment when he was able to break out of those of the pocket and get downfield. You're going to have that same type of challenge this week with Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray has some good weapons to throw to. And probably the biggest thing that's going to be focused on this game, Dan, is what is this secondary going to look like? As it stands right now, Christian Fulton is officially questionable for this game. So
secondary,
whether or not Christian Fulton ends up playing in this game, your secondary is going to be up to a tough challenge, because we all saw the difference that Christian Fulton made when he was in the game against the Denver Broncos. And then as the game rallied off in that late fourth quarter, when they started putting up consecutive points, you could see how different it looked when he was not out on the field. So against a Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, Kyler Murray led offense, this secondary could be in for a very big challenge come Monday night.
Yeah, it's going to be weird. And what's weird is this Cardinals team. You look at their schedule and the teams that they've won and lost to, we've seen blowouts on both sides. We've seen them blow out the Rams 41-10, get blown out by the Commanders 42-14, blown out by the Packers 34-13, beat the Niners 24-23, lose to the Lions 2013, lose to the Bills 34-28. So they've lost to a bunch of great teams. They've only lost to the Bills, the Lions, the Commanders, and the Packers. Packers, I'd say good. But for the most part, the losses they've had have been against good teams, and the wins have been against bad teams. Except for that Niners game. That's kind of their shining armor, if you will. It's a weird offense for this, I think, Cardinals team, and it's also kind of a weird time for them as they bring back Marvin Harrison Jr., obvious stud, blue chip player, but into an offense that isn't really built for that style of play, at least not yet. It seems like it's more of a tight end focus, run focus offense. And to me, this is really going to be about, can the Chargers defense continue to do what it does? And can the offense get in rhythm? And there's a bunch of specifics in those, but if the offense can get in rhythm and the Chargers defense can continue to be who it is, this game's a wrap. If you tell me both those two things are happening, game's over, Chargers win. But a bunch of matchups on both sides. Jake, would you rather do Chargers offense first or Chargers defense first in terms of the matchup against the Cardinals?
Let's do Chargers defense first, because I think that's going to be what's really going to be talked about. That's going to be where I think where the biggest challenge lies. So let's start there. Let's start on that side of the football.
Okay, so I think you mentioned it, and we'll kind of lead into it with some of the injury stuff. The Chargers defense, I think, is going to be in for quite the test. Not because of how great the Cardinals are on offense, but because how decimated the Chargers are, specifically in the secondary, which is the area of this team that has been the best. This Chargers secondary is already without Asante Samuel Jr., who's on IR. I believe Dean Leonard has been downgraded to out.
Yes, he has.
Jazir Taylor, I think, is questionable. And Christian Fulton has been limited, was not practicing, and then back to limited. So they could be without their starting two corners, and they might have to rely on an Eli Apple to come in at some point. Maybe not to start, but to play. You got Tarheeb Still, maybe Jazir Taylor. I mean, you're down to kind of slim pickings at the secondary. You're hoping that your safety group can match up, but this is where you gotta be a little concerned if you're the Chargers secondary going up against the Cardinals offense that has a borderline all-pro tight end in Trey McBride, a guy who could scramble like crazy in Kyler Murray, and a thumper in James Conner. Like that. Thankfully, those are the parts of this team, the Chargers specifically, that are pretty good, aside from the Marvin Harrison Jr. piece. But yeah, the secondary for the Chargers kind of scares me just because they are so thin. I trust Jesse Minter and Steve Klingscale, obviously, but still, that's a tall task.
Yeah. If anybody got a chance to look at the side-by-side injury reports for both the Cardinals and the Chargers this week, it's about the same length. I mean, both teams came into this game with a lot of injuries. Obviously, Arizona a little bit more favorable in terms of what their current injury status was over the Chargers. But yeah, Dan, that's the focus. How's Jesse Minter going to navigate this? Like you said, everything that has been done defensively with this group thus far this season, I have full confidence that Jesse Minter is going to be able to figure it out. However, this is not the Denver Broncos offense that you're going up against. This is some legit wide receiver and tight end power that you're going to have to figure out a way to cover across the middle, because Trey McBride is emerging as one of the great tight ends in this game for Arizona in terms of what he's able to do with the football, in terms of how defenses have to cover him, have to focus on him. And then Marvin Harrison Jr., we've already seen what he's done in a short period of time. He's finally rounding into what everybody expected to have him hit the ground running on. So he's hitting his stride. And I'm telling you, if this Cardinals offense becomes balanced and you're able to run the ball, it's only going to make that challenge that much bigger.
Realistically, if we were to look at kind of the big level here, high level, not big level, high level, we're talking about an average Cardinals offense against a dominant Chargers defense on that side of the ball. Average Cardinals offense, dominant Chargers defense. And when we flip later, it's going to be really bad Chargers offense against really bad Cardinals defense. So on this side, average offense for Arizona. I'll give you some numbers here real quick. 15th in third down percentage allowed. 17th in points per game. 15th in red zone percentage, ending in a touchdown. 10th in yards per drive. 13th in EPA. 15th in total yards. Just 24th in passing yards, which is kind of weird from a Kyler Murray team. But again, this is the new Gruden-led offense. But second best in rushing yards per attempt. So again, a bunch of averages, right? In that 10 to 20 range-ish. And you look at the Chargers, right? How often have we gotten to say this? These are all top 10s, Jake. Yards per game, rushing yards allowed, rushing yards per game, yards per attempt, excuse me. Yards after the catch allowed, missed tackles, and points against, EPA per play, and points per game in the first half, all in the top 10 in the NFL for this Los Angeles Chargers defense. Number one in points against allowed. Number one in points per game in the first half allowed. Third best in EPA per play. So Chargers do everything well. They're balanced, right? 8th in passing yards allowed. 6th in rushing yards per game. 6th in total yards per game allowed. So if you're Arizona, there really isn't one weakness aside from now there being an injury problem for this Chargers defense. The one thing that's kind of, I think, a key here, obviously, is containing Kyler Murray. Please give us the first 3 quarters of that Broncos game and the containment, and not the last quarter against Bo Nix, because that last quarter was awful of containment. They need to contain Kyler Murray, keep him inside the pocket, make him a pocket passer, stop the run, Chargers win, period. There's no way this Cardinals offense is successful if Kyler is in the pocket with a bad running game.
Yeah, Dan, you go back and you look at specifically the Packers game, the game that the Cardinals win against the Commanders, and then you go back to the Lions game. That should be the blueprint for where you want to keep Kyler Murray for this game. In terms of what he was able to do or the lack thereof, those are the type of stats that you want to have Kyler Murray finish that game with. In terms of containment, running up the score, much like the same type of philosophy that we said with this Chargers team in terms of get ahead of the sticks quickly. Do not allow that offense to become balanced, which is going to make it more versatile, especially when you have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride as those type of weapons. And as you mentioned, Dan, the containment for Kyler Murray, it may almost be a blessing in disguise for the standpoint that you just got to witness Bo Nix be Denver's leading running back last week when he had 6 rushes of 61 yards. And it should just keep that in mind because you're going up against a completely different animal who can do those type of things with much more ease than Bo Nix can tomorrow night. So it'll be a tough challenge. But like you said, I think that when it comes to stopping the run, Poona Ford and Tahir Tart have done a great job at anchoring the middle of that offensive line. Obviously, you're still not going to have Joey Bosa in this game. The pass rush outside of Khalil Mack is something that I would like to see be able to exploit this Cardinals offense a little bit more. I'm glad you
brought this up. Yep.
Outside of Paris Johnson Jr., I think that there are some creative ways that Jesse Minter can get inside on the blitz. Overall, the Cardinals aren't a bad pass blocking team, but I think that there is ways that if you can have some specific stunts that come in, they run a lot of 13 personnel and play action. So how are you going to devise to go against that? But if you can create pressure up the middle, I think that's where you're going to be able to get Kyler Murray rattled, not allow him to break containment and come up in the pocket and, break off one of these runs that we've always seen him do. So that's where I think that they're going to have to get after it. Again, pass rush, I think just over the past few weeks, I know that the Chargers obviously had flustered Bo Nix last week. We're able to get a couple sacks in on him, but it hasn't always been outside of Khalil Mack from the edges that we're used to seeing, especially when we talked about so much during the preseason, what that foursome of Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Thule, and Bud Dupree was going to be.
They're winning on defense in different ways, and they're really on the backs of linebackers and secondary. And I've said this for a few weeks now, like the pressure, blitz, sacks, all that stuff hasn't been great for the Chargers so far this season. And for the Cardinals, they've only given up 11 sacks all year in 6 games. Like, that's not much at all. So I don't think this is the week you're going to see the Chargers defense get rolling on sacks. So I don't think they need necessarily get to sacks. They just have to not let him scramble for positive yards, him being Kyler Murray. Again, this Chargers defense so far in the year going into this week, dead last in hurry percentage on defense, 30th in pressure percentage, 28th in quarterback knockdowns. So even they're not getting to the quarterback as often, but for the most part, they are finishing it when they do. So 15th in total sacks per game, but almost last in hurries, pressures, and knockdowns. So an offense that doesn't give up any sacks, a defense that doesn't pressure a punch. This doesn't seem like the game you're going to see a bunch of sacks, especially when, yet again, Joey Bosa is not playing. So, again, James Conner, I think, is a big focus point. Trey McBride is a big focus point. If you can keep those two in check, then the big variable is who's going to be guarding A1 Marvin Harrison Jr. Is Cam Hart going to have to be starting outside? Big body going up against him. Tarheeb Still, can he do it? Are you going to see some practice squad guys elevate and actually play? Can Christian Fulton actually come dress? I don't know. That's what scares me, is the fluke. We got nobody back there, and Marvin Harrison torches whoever's there.
Yeah, Dan, remember just a couple weeks ago, one of the Arizona's best offensive linemen, and Will Hernandez, was actually lost for the season. So they brought in, it was Evan Brown that they brought in to replace him, which is, again, why I say that I would like to see that pressure come from the middle. Again, when
Interior.
It comes to, containment, getting to Kyler Murray in that circumstance, if you're able to blow up the line from that part of the defense, so whether this is a Morgan Fox type of a game or you have Thule coming in on some stunts, I think this is where you can look to exploit this offensive line, which hopefully should end up impacting this offense overall.
Anything else? Chargers defense versus Cardinals offense before flipping the script, going the other way. Jesse Minter.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. You feel uneasy when you look at the possibility of what the secondary is going to be, but at the same time, I don't know, Dan, if I have actually, I'm not as worried as I traditionally would be looking at a secondary like this. And it's because Jesse Minter has proven it now through 5 games for the Chargers in terms of what he is able to do. I have to keep reminding myself of the quotes that other coaches that he coached with in college, some of whom are still on this Chargers roster right now, in terms of Jesse Minter's preparation and getting guys up for games. He is one of the best to do it. So he's shown us through the first 5 weeks that he is more than capable of doing it. And even with, you might want to call it skeleton crew type of secondary, even with the likes of Cam Hart and Tarheeb still out there, I'm excited to see what he's going to do with this defense, because outside the secondary, you know that there's 2 other levels that are going to end up affecting the opposing offense. So if those levels can oppose it, I think the secondary can thrive.
Yep. I guess last thing would just be some tendencies for Kyler Murray. He's pretty darn good in the 10 to 20 yard throw-in range. He's got an 86.3, which is almost elite passing grade in PFF. Things he does not do. He does not throw deep left very well. 3 for 12 total on the season. So just 3 completions in 12 attempts. But if you look at areas like in intermediate on the left side, 8 of 12 for 109 yards. Intermediate in the middle of the field, 6 of 9. Intermediate right, not as great, 4 of 11. So if you can stop the middle of the field, for the most part, you should be good. In theory, you should be good. But again, big variable because of the secondary piece. But those are just some tendencies for.
So Deion Henley, Junior Colson, Denzel Perryman, this is also a big game for them. I'd be interested to know, is this going to be a similar type of game for Derwin James that traditionally you would see him have against Travis Kelce? Are you going to have him shadow Trey McBride for a majority of this game because of the athleticism that he brings?
This might be it. This might be the one to do it. This might be the one to do it. You know, when you, for example, when you play the Chiefs, right, you had your full complement of secondary available then, and you're able to kind of move Derwin a little bit around more and not have to have him on one-on-one. Now, if their best player is a tight end, maybe you just stick Derwin on him for most of it. Who else would you feel more comfortable than Derwin, honestly?
Normally I would say that. But in this case, if you are going to be in a situation to where you have Tarheeb still playing on the outside with Cam Hart, especially if Jasir Taylor doesn't play, do you just stick Derwin in the nickel the whole game? Much like you had to do against the Broncos when you were adjusting on the fly. Maybe you don't have to do that because this isn't
so lucky.
Situation.
They are so lucky they have Elijah Molden right now. He is such.
I would also expect Tony Jefferson to be elevated for this game as well. Actually, no, I take that back. They just signed him back to the practice squad, so that's my fault. I retract that statement. So then it's Elijah Molden, AJ Finley that are going to have to back that up in that circumstance. But again, I'll be interested to see what Jesse Minter comes up with. That was on the fly and what you were having to do in that late fourth quarter of the Denver Broncos games. Now you're better prepared for the personnel that you're going to have out there this week. So what are you going to come up with?
Chargers offense. I'm going to put offense in air quotes versus the Cardinals defense. I'll also put that in air quotes right now. Both of them have left some to be desired, obviously. And again, tale of two sides, obviously. The Chargers offense, for the most part, Jake, this might make some Chargers fans very unhappy, but the Chargers offense is worse than the Cardinals offense. And the Cardinals offense, again, just average, like you talked about. Chargers offense, yards per game, 29th. Passing yards, 29th. Points for, 27th. Yards per drive, 27th. 5th worst red zone percentage in the NFL, Jake, 41.7. EPA per play, 22nd. Now that's bad. All those numbers are bad. The only things that are, I guess, somewhat average, rushing yards, they're 10th. Third down percentage, they're 10th. There really hasn't been any other good in terms of these offensive statistics. Good news for the Chargers is there are terrible numbers for this Cardinals defense. And I mean terrible. 27th in yards allowed per game. 29th rushing yards per game. 24th in yards after the catch. 6th lowest blitz percentage for this Cardinals defense, which Justin Herbert will thrive if you do not blitz him. Sacks per game, 25th. 4th worst pressure percentage. 31st in time of possession allowed. 2nd worst in time of possession allowed for their defense. Yards per drive, 2nd most in the NFL. 29th in quarterback hits. Dead last in third down percentage. 3rd most points per game allowed in the first half. And 5th worst EPA per play in the NFL. If there was ever a get right time for this Chargers offense, this is it. If Greg Roman and company can't cook in this one, sound the alarm.
There's a little bit of Dan Wolkenstein's villain arc that I was looking for. It was too positive on this show for the first 25 minutes that we have been talking right now. There's a reason why J.K. Dobbins is currently on the screen for anybody who's listening on audio and can't see anything of what's being displayed currently right now.
And also starting for the first time this year on my fantasy team.
J.K. Dobbins?
Yep.
It's the first time you're starting him?
I have Breece Hall and I've had Derrick Henry. both of which have been balling. But
what's your record?
I've lost one game.
Okay. Was it the one game that you didn't have J.K. Dobbins in?
No, this is the first time I'm having him in there.
Okay, but did you lose because of J.K. Dobbins not being in your lineup last week?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Well, then you have
I've made the right decision so far.
You have escaped
for the most part
situation. So
yes,
good for you. If you do have J.K. Dobbins on your fantasy lineup, like Dan and I
week,
both do, definitely fire him up. Yes, 100%. As Dan mentioned, those stats defensively for the Arizona Cardinals. Side note, does it not feel good just a little bit to not have a bottom ranked run defense and the word Chargers in the same sentence for a change? That feels really, really good to hear this time around.
It does.
So yeah, Dan, I would, like I was saying, currently J.K. Dobbins on the screen. You may even want to like wedge Kamani Vidal in there just slightly, because I think it's going to be a very good dose of both of them going into this game, which is in turn, I think, going to let Justin Herbert be a little bit more efficient in his passing, obviously going to give balance to this offense, going to set things up a little bit better. Dan, currently the Chargers roster sits at 52 players. And normally when you have that
DJ Khaled.
We could be seeing the season debut of a one DJ Chark, who currently has a questionable tag heading into this game. But indications are that you may actually have him activated fully to the 53-man roster and available tomorrow night to play, which obviously, especially with Quentin Johnston having a doubtful tag, is something that you're really going to need. And for all of those who have been looking for the long ball through the first 5 games of the Chargers season, do the Chargers take some of those shots, Dan?
I hope they do. Just like we talked about last week, and they did, thankfully. That 52 spots now, there's one open. I think there's a question mark there with Christian Fulton and Quentin Johnston. And then who would replace them? Possibly DJ Chark, or maybe an Eli Apple or something, or someone from the practice squad in the secondary.
According to Harbaugh, it's everything that I heard from him in relation to Eli Apple. It sounded like it was going to be too early for Eli Apple to be activated this week.
To be activated?
Or not, excuse me, not activated, because you signed him to the practice squad. So I don't believe that's going to be elevated, excuse me.
Okay. I hope they go deep. Quentin Johnston to ankle, he's not really one I'd probably go deep to. But yeah, Darius Davis, Ladd McConkey, go deep. Again, soften up the coverage. I don't care if the ball lands in bounds. Just make it look like you're throwing it deep. Defenses have to stay back and respect it.
Dan, you mentioned the yards given up per game for Arizona. This is a true dichotomy 1 week apart between what Denver's defense does and what Arizona's defense does. There is no Patrick Surtain in this particular secondary. And even without Patrick Surtain, it was hard for the Chargers at some point to keep drives alive. Thankfully for them, they got ahead of the sticks and were able to put up points. But the reason I asked this question is, Dan, I know you want to see him throw it deep, and so do a lot of other people. But given the opponent opposite of you, do they really need to?
That's a question mark. I don't know. Do they need to? I think they do. I don't think they have to be successful at it, but I think they have to at least put it on tape. They have to do it. Again, this is bad on worse. And so one of these things has to break. Either the really, really, really bad defense balls out and overachieves, or the bad offense balls out and overachieves. You can't have a bad offense playing a bad defense and both of those things stay true. This is going to happen. I trust Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman and company to have an effective running game against this team. 10th best rushing team, for the Chargers versus 29th in the Cardinals. So 29th total yards per game for the Chargers offense, 27th total yards per game allowed by the Chargers defense. So can they do it? I don't know. But that third down percentage allowed dead last at almost 50% by this Cardinals defense. It spells a good day for Ladd McConkey and J.K. Dobbins.
I'm glad you brought up Ladd, specifically in the middle of the field. If there's any situations to where he happens to come across former Charger Kaiser White across the middle of the field, he shouldn't, but he should be moving right past him if that is the case. We've all kind of been waiting for that Ladd McConkey breakout game to see a 6 receptions, 80 yards, and a touchdown type of a game.
I'm going higher than that.
He's come close. He's come close previously. This would be an ideal game for that to happen. I think that you're going to see, I think the glimpse of what we saw from this Chargers offense, especially after the bye, a little bit more play action, Justin Herbert healthy, able to move around a little bit better in the pocket, obviously had his most efficient game through the first 5 games that the Chargers have had so far this season. I think this is going to be much in the same. I think that Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh did a good enough job to go back to, take the bye, figure out what had been missing during those 2 games where your offense just couldn't get anything going. And I thought that you looked a lot more efficient. Now, Dan and I have talked about there has been an issue that has been reoccurring now over the last several weeks with the Chargers is they can put points up to start games. That's all well and good. But when it comes to the second half, more recently, especially ever since the Carolina Panthers game, you have had an issue in putting up points in the second half, which the Chargers are
in the
going
NFL.
to need to do. So
5 points per game.
Figure out a way to string together efficient drives, figure out ways to keep putting points up on the board, whether it's 7 or 3, it does not matter. I mean, you would like to see 7 every time.
Just give me 1.
But I would like to see more efficiency in terms of drives and getting points up on the board, especially when it comes to the second half, because you never like to see a situation like Denver that even when the game seemed away, you get that old Chargers feeling in the pit of your stomach to say, oh God, no. No, not when it comes to the fourth quarter. Please, I do not want to see 16 unanswered points scored once again in the fourth quarter, and this game is tight.
Chargers dead last in the NFL in the second half points scored per game. Dead last. That's behind New England Patriots, Miami Dolphins without Tua, and Carolina Panthers. Dead last by more than a point. 5.0 for the Chargers, 6.7 and higher for everyone else.
And you wouldn't expect that from a team that is led by Justin Herbert at quarterback.
No. So, but again, trend lines. Cardinals defense allow the 3rd most points per game in the NFL in the first half and are 17th in points per game in the second half. So they are typically like the Chargers. They allow a bunch of points in the first half. They get a little bit better in the second half. Chargers opposite. They score more in the first half, terrible in the second. So something's going to give there for sure. So Jake, I think, do you see this being a game in which we see, obviously, J.K. Dobbins and company are going to run the rock a ton? Do you see over under passing yards for Justin Herbert this week versus last week?
What's the line?
I think it was, yes, last week's was like 220 something. Do you see him throwing for more or less yards than last week?
Yeah, I could see him going over. I could see that. I could see them turning this into his best game that he's got. Specifically, when you look at that, I mean, it was good enough from the standpoint that you saw it. Even it wasn't the most gaudy numbers, but still to be that efficient offensively in both the passing and the run game against Denver's defense, when they have proven a number of different times how strong that defense can be. I thought that was a great example of what they're capable of doing against a tough defensive opponent. It's quite the opposite this week when you go against them. And yes, there are injuries on both sides of the ball. You'd like to have certain people in this offense that are not going to be playing, but how do you seemingly the Chargers have been battling the injury bug since week 1 and having to adapt and having the next man step up. The difference is with this year, as opposed to previous years, when someone says next man up, there's actually been somebody there. That's been the kicker. So I'm excited to see what Greg Roman is going to do, have a little bit more creativity in his offensive game plan in terms of giving Justin Herbert those opportunities to pass it downfield, uncork it a little bit. Hell, even if need be, if he's healthy enough, to utilize his legs, because you know what those do to opposing defenses, and that's most of the time when Justin Herbert is mobile is when he is most dangerous, whether we're talking bootlegs or him just running the ball or even able to keep those drives going by utilizing his legs. It just absolutely debilitates opposing defenses when you can do that. So, yeah, DJ Chark, I think, is something that we've been waiting for a while in terms of to see like, oh, is this going to be the key ingredient for the downfield offense that we have been waiting to see with Justin Herbert? Time will tell on that. I personally don't think that you need all of that in DJ Chark to win this game. I think you could be more efficient. I think you can work the middle of the field extremely easily with Ladd McConkey, Joshua Palmer, however you're going to utilize these things. Obviously, Simi Fehoko stepped up big time last week when receivers started going down. Wouldn't mind seeing him again. Wouldn't mind seeing another game from him again. That is for sure. But Dan, I think again, if these running lanes opened up for J.K. Dobbins and Kamani Vidal, which they absolutely should, that's going to be step one in dictating the rest of the pace throughout this game.
And again, you look at the AFC West. As we're recording right now, Raiders lose. They have 2 wins total. The Chiefs look like they're going to beat the 49ers. They will be undefeated still. And the Broncos had a pretty impressive performance, all things considered, against the Saints. Again, Saints crippled with injuries, but still, Broncos are 4-3. So, Chargers got to win this one to stay in second place in the AFC. So this is AFC West, excuse me. It's a big one. Bold predictions and final prediction.
I realize we haven't done. It does not feel like we have done a bold prediction in a long time. I don't think that we did it for the Denver game, and I think just with that time off throughout the bye, it seems like it's been forever since we've done a bold prediction. I don't want to do like the low-hanging fruit. I could tell you right now that J.K. Dobbins is going to find another game where he's over 100 yards and he's going to have 2 touchdowns under his belt, much like he did against Carolina. But I don't want to go that route, Dan. I want to go something different. I teased it a little bit earlier.
Don't take mine. You're going to take mine. I know you're taking mine.
Is it Ladd? If it's Ladd, okay. I will leave it to you. Go ahead and go first. That's what a nice guy I am. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to say this is the week that Ladd goes over 100. I'm going to give Ladd $110 and a touchdown.
That was the line I was going to give him too. Good job.
Dang, let's go. Same wavelength.
Ladd over 100 and a tutty.
All right. So that's mine. What do you got?
That's pretty good. The Chargers have had a knack for taking the ball away. I'll go to the opposite side of the football. I know what I was talking about, the challenges that they're going to be facing against Marvin Harrison, Kyler Murray, Trey McBride going up. It's going to be a tall task because of the crew that you have back there in the secondary. This is how much faith I have in Jesse Minter.
Oh.
Whether it's Elijah Molden or it's Derwin James, or if we're talking another Khalil Mack strip sack turnover for the Chargers, I'm going to say that the Chargers have 3 turnovers in this game.
3. Okay. This is going to be this one. I'm excited to see what this Chargers offense can do when it's, for the most part, the healthy it's been all season. For the most part.
Which is saying something.
Yeah. You've got,
considering who's not playing right now.
Yeah. You've got both your tackles, which is a huge deal. Justin Herbert is probably the healthiest he's been since he got the ankle injury. You've got J.K. Dobbins. Again, Gus Edwards is out, which isn't great. Quentin Johnson might be out, which isn't great, but maybe get DJ Chark back. Hayden Hurst is out, but you still have Will Dissly, who somehow catches a screen for 20 yards every game. But you still got Ladd McConkey, you still got Josh Palmer. And so this is, I think, a time for the Chargers to kind of show who they are. And if they can come out of this one swinging, score points early, stay consistent in the second half, keep the foot on the gas, see if they can double their points per game in the second half. I don't know what, 20? Give me 10. I'll take 10. Go from 5 to 10. I'll take it. I'll be happy with it. I have the Chargers winning this one, Jake. 27-17.
27-17. Okay. It's not a bad line. Look, you look at the Chargers last mentioned it after the Denver game. They have only allowed 20 points one time this year, and that was to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not against the Chiefs, not against the Raiders, not against the Broncos. They have kept the rest of the teams that they have played, even in losses, under 20 points.
Marvin and Kyler scare me. That style of quarterback and that style of receiver.
They should. Do not take this Arizona offense lightly, considering what you have playing in your current secondary. I could see this, Dan, as totally a situation to where the Chargers could control the clock, control the pace, stay ahead of the sticks, build up a nice lead. But I could also see this as a situation, given the deficiencies on both teams, on both sides of the ball, I could totally see a shootout. Honestly, I could see a 30-27 type of a game, and it finishing on the last second of a Cameron Dicker field goal. I could totally see that.
The good news though, is the one kryptonite the Chargers have had at end of games has been kind of that pressure blitz percentage just goes through the roof for opposing defenses. This Cardinals defense does not blitz. Sixth lowest in the NFL, just 19.6% of the time, and pressure fourth worst, just 16.1. So that's not good. That's not a lot. 29th in quarterback hits.
Yeah.
So the things that the Chargers offense is usually bad at, stopping the pressure, stopping blitzes and stunts and such, the Cardinals are equally as bad, if not worse.
Yeah, we talk about, again, dichotomy. You look at the last three teams the Chargers have played when it comes to blitzing and what their defensive line is like. Pittsburgh Steelers, Kansas City Chiefs, and Denver Broncos. Even in a victory over the Denver Broncos, the Broncos were still blitzing Justin Herbert at a very, very high rate. Pick your poison, whether or not you want to do it with Justin Herbert, because he can win against the blitz, and his offensive line is back healthy now. How are the Arizona Cardinals going to go about doing that? Time will tell. I'll finally make my prediction, Dan. I'll say the Chargers end up winning this game. I'll actually go 3 points more than you. I'll go 30-17.
The Chargers score 30 points on offense.
The Chargers against this Arizona Cardinals team. I think the Denver Bronco game was a little snippet of what Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh were working on during the bye. And I think they will have their most efficient output that they have had since week 2 against the Carolina Panthers.
If we can see a 30-point explosion by the Chargers offense and a 4-2 Chargers team, you'll officially see the euphoric, positive, happy Dan Wolkenstein. I would love it. I hope you're right.
What if it ends up being 30-27? I don't see you being euphoric and up in the clouds. I see that villain arc continuing.
I don't think so, because I think that would be more like
win.
But I think that would be, but if that happens, I think that's more like exception to the rules. The Chargers offense finally came to show up, and the Chargers defense gave up one. But it happens sometimes.
All right, I'll remember you said that, because even in nail-biting close victories that we had for the past 3.5 years, it didn't matter to Dan Wolkenstein that it was a 13-10 victory or a victory 7-6. It did not matter. He came on the very next day and was ultra positive. You beat the Denver Broncos last week against a divisional opponent with a lot of question marks, and Dan Wolkenstein was still pissed off at certain things. I get it. So I'll remember you said that if it ends up being close, just how happy you're going to be when we record the next day.
Okay, I'm sure everyone watching and listening will as well. Jake, anything else before we get out of here and watch some Sunday Night Football?
Monday Night Harbaugh. Let's go to work.
Monday Night Harbaugh. Can't wait. For Jake Hefner, I think this is going to do it, man. For you can find you at Jake T. Hefner, myself at Dan W. Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed.